What if the person you see in your dreams isn't a figment of your imagination, but a real version of you, living a life you didn't choose? What if every night, when the world goes quiet and your eyelids fall, you don't disappear, you multiply? Think of it as the double-slit experiment of the mind. During the day, your consciousness behaves like a particle, fixed, measured, pinned to one place, one job, one name, one life. But at night, when no one is watching, it becomes a wave spreading out across every possible reality, every road you didn't take, every door you never opened. And here is where it gets unsettling. Deep inside your brain sits the thalamus, that ancient, walnut-shaped gatekeeper that filters every sound, every touch, every photon of light before it reaches your awareness. Neuroscience calls it a relay station. But what if it is something far stranger? What if the thalamus is a quantum observer, the very thing that collapses the infinite possibilities of your existence into this single, solid moment you call today? And what if, every night when you fall asleep, that observer steps away from its post? The gate doesn't just close, it dissolves, and the doors to the multiverse swing wide open. Now consider this. Quantum entanglement tells us that two particles, once connected, mirror each other instantly across any distance, across a room, across a galaxy, across the fabric of space-time itself. So what happens when you dream of a stranger whose face you have never seen, whose voice you somehow already know? What if that is not your imagination constructing a character? What if that is entanglement, a literal neural thread stretching across the cosmic void, connecting you to another you, living a parallel life you can only glimpse when your waking mind finally lets go? This is why déjà vu stops you cold in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. This is why certain dreams don't fade like dreams should they linger. Heavy, textured, more vivid than anything your open eyes have ever shown you. They feel more real than reality because maybe, just maybe, they are. These aren't glitches. They are bleed-throughs, cracks in the architecture of your sleep, where one universe brushes up against another. So tonight, understand what is actually happening. You are not just sleeping, you are traveling. Your pillow is not a pillow, it is a launch pad into the quantum foam of existence, that seething, submicroscopic ocean where universes are born and destroyed 1 trillion times per second. And your mind, unshackled from the tyranny of waking observation, is finally free to drift between them. So close your eyes, slow your breathing, and prepare not for rest, but for reunion. Somewhere beyond the threshold of consciousness, the other versions of you are waiting, the ones you left behind every time you made a choice. Tonight, you go to meet them. There is an experiment that changed everything we thought we knew about the nature of reality. It is simple enough to describe, but its implications are so profound, so deeply disturbing to the rational mind, that nearly a century after it was first performed, the greatest physicists alive still argue about what it means. It is called the double-slit experiment, and once you understand it, you will never look at your own consciousness the same way again. Picture a wall with two narrow slits cut into it. Behind that wall is a screen, a detector that records where things land. Now, fire a stream of tiny particles, photons of light, or electrons toward the two slits. Common sense tells you what should happen. Each particle should pass through one slit or the other, like a bullet through a doorway, and you should see two bands of impact on the screen behind. Two slits, two lines. Simple, logical, predictable. But that is not what happens. When no one is watching, when no detector is placed at the slits to measure which path each particle takes, something impossible occurs. The particles do not form two neat lines. They create an interference pattern, a series of alternating bright and dark bands spread across the entire screen. This is the signature of a wave. Somehow, each particle, each single, indivisible unit of matter passes through both slits at the same time. It interferes with itself, as if it were not a particle at all, but a ripple spreading across the surface of an invisible ocean, exploring every possible path simultaneously. Now, here is where the universe starts to feel like it is hiding something from you. Place a detector at the slits. Watch, observe, measure which slit the particle travels through. And the moment you do, the interference pattern vanishes. The wave collapses. The particle behaves like a particle again, one slit, one path, one outcome. Two neat lines on the screen, just as common sense predicted. The act of observation itself, the mere presence of a watcher, forces the infinite to become the finite. Possibility becomes fact. The many become the one. Let that settle in your mind for a moment. Reality, at its most fundamental level, appears to exist in a state of infinite possibility until something observes it, until something watches. And then, and only then, does it commit to being one thing instead of everything. Now forget about photons. Forget about laboratories and screens and slits cut into barriers. Think instead about you. Think about what your brain does every single moment of every waking day. Because your brain is an observer. It might be the most sophisticated observation device that nature has ever produced. And the question that should keep you up at night, or perhaps, more accurately, the question that reveals itself when you stop staying up, is this: what happens to reality when the observer goes to sleep? During your waking hours, your consciousness operates with extraordinary precision. There is a structure deep in the center of your brain called the thalamus. It is ancient. It evolved before language, before logic, before anything you would recognize as thought. And its role is deceptively simple. It is a gate. Every signal from the outside world, every ray of light that hits your retina, every vibration of sound that rattles your eardrum, every pressure on your skin, every temperature, every taste, every smell, all of it passes through the thalamus before it reaches the higher regions of your brain where conscious experience is assembled. The thalamus decides what gets through. It filters, it prioritizes, it focuses. It takes the roaring, chaotic infinity of raw sensory data and collapses it into a single, coherent, manageable stream. And it does not work alone. Sitting behind your forehead is the prefrontal cortex, the newest, most evolved region of your brain. This is where decision lives, where judgment lives, where the unrelenting voice of rational analysis narrows every moment into a chain of causes and effects. The prefrontal cortex takes the filtered stream from the thalamus and sharpens it further. It pins your attention to one thing at a time. It constructs linear time past, then present, then future. It builds the story of your day, your week, your life. And it insists that the story makes sense, that it follows rules, that it is one story and not 1,000 stories happening at once. Together, the thalamus and the prefrontal cortex form what we might call the observational focus of human consciousness. They are the detector at the slit. They are the watcher. And their entire purpose is to collapse the wave, to take the immeasurable, sprawling, overlapping chaos of potential experience and force it into a single line. One reality, one timeline, one you, standing in one place, making one choice at a time. Imagine a vast, dark theater, the kind of darkness that is so total you cannot see your own hand. And in that darkness, 1,000 actors stand on an enormous stage, all of them moving, all of them speaking, all of them performing different scenes from different plays simultaneously. Now switch on a single spotlight, a tight, focused beam that illuminates only one actor, one scene, one story. Everything else vanishes not because it has stopped, but because you can no longer see it. The other actors are still there, still moving, still speaking their lines into the dark, but your experience has been reduced to the one circle of light. That spotlight is your waking consciousness. The thalamus aims it. The prefrontal cortex holds it steady, and together they convince you that the one actor you can see is the only actor on the stage. This is your day. This is every day. You wake up and the spotlight clicks on, and you walk through a world that feels solid and singular and real. You are a particle, one path, one slit, two neat lines on the screen of your experience. Predictable, logical, fixed. But what happens when you lie down at the end of that day and the weight of exhaustion presses your eyelids shut and the waking world begins to dissolve at the edges? What happens in that slow, strange descent through the layers of drowsiness into the ocean of sleep? The thalamus begins to close its gate, not all at once, but gradually, like a drawbridge being raised. The signals from the outside world grow faint. The sounds of the room become distant, then meaningless, then gone. The sensation of the sheets against your skin fades into abstraction. The prefrontal cortex, that tireless narrator of logic and order, begins to lose its grip. Its voice, the voice that kept you anchored to one reality all day, grows quiet, then confused, then silent. The spotlight flickers, dims, and goes dark. And in that darkness, the other actors begin to move. This is the moment I call the quantum threshold. It is not a place. It is not a time. Exactly. It is a transition, a border crossing between two fundamentally different modes of existence. On one side, the classical world, where things are solid and singular and where the rules of cause and effect hold firm. On the other side, something that operates by entirely different laws. Something that looks, if you squint at it with the right kind of understanding, remarkably like the quantum world. Because when the observer retreats, when the thalamus stops filtering and the prefrontal cortex stops narrating, your consciousness does not simply shut off. It does something far more extraordinary. It expands. Without the spotlight forcing it into a single beam, your awareness begins to spread. It stops being a particle. It starts becoming a wave. Think about what your dreaming mind actually does. It is not bound to one location. In a single dream, you can be in your childhood home, then a city you have never visited, then a landscape that does not exist on any map. And the transitions between them are seamless, instantaneous, as natural as breathing. Your dreaming mind is not bound to one identity. You can be yourself, and then someone older, someone younger, someone you have never been, and you accept each transformation without question. Your dreaming mind is not bound to one timeline. Past, present, and future collapse into a single fluid now, where your dead grandmother sits beside your unborn child, and neither of them finds this strange. Your dreaming consciousness is not a particle, it is a wave function spreading across every possibility, occupying multiple states at once, uncollapsed, unmeasured, free. And now I need you to sit with a question that will feel uncomfortable. If the observer is what collapses reality into a single state, and the observer goes offline every time you fall asleep, then what happens to your reality? If you are not there to observe your own world, does your world still exist in the same way? Does it remain that single, fixed, logical line? Or does it, like the particle in the experiment, expand back into a wave of possibilities the moment no one is watching? Classical physics would say the question is absurd. The world is the world, whether you are looking at it or not. The moon does not vanish when you close your eyes. But quantum physics, the physics that governs the very atoms your body is made of, the photons that carry light to your eyes, the electrons that fire across your synapses to create the experience of being alive, quantum physics is not so sure. At the quantum level, observation matters, measurement matters. The watcher changes what is watched. And every night, for 6 or 7 or 8 hours, you stop watching. The quantum threshold is where the laws of your waking life expire. Linear time breaks apart. Solid space becomes fluid. Identity becomes plural. The rigid architecture of observed reality softens into something pliable, something that responds to will and feeling rather than logic and law. You cross this threshold every single night, and every single morning you come back, and the spotlight clicks on, and you forget that the darkness was full of motion. But the wave does not simply expand into emptiness. As your consciousness spreads across this space of possibility, as it explores states and places and versions of experience that your waking mind would reject as impossible, it begins to encounter something. There are patterns in the wave, resonances, harmonics, moments where the ripples of your expanding awareness seem to meet other ripples moving toward you from the opposite direction, like two stones dropped into the same pond from different edges. What are those other ripples? Where are they coming from? Are they merely echoes of your own mind bouncing back from the walls of your unconscious? Or is it possible, even faintly, even theoretically, even as a question we are only brave enough to ask in the dark, that they are coming from somewhere else, from someone else, from another wave function that looks almost, but not quite, like yours? Because quantum mechanics tells us something else that defies every comfortable assumption we hold about the separateness of things. It tells us that particles that have once interacted remain connected, entangled no matter how far apart they travel. A measurement on one instantaneously affects the other, not through any signal, not through any force, through something deeper than distance itself. And if your consciousness truly operates as a wave when the observer sleeps, if it truly spreads across a field of infinite possibility, then what happens when your wave touches another wave that shares your origin, your frequency, your fundamental signature? What happens when the version of you that exists in this universe brushes against the version of you that took a different path, made a different choice, lived a different life? That is not a question for tonight. Tonight, we stand here at the threshold and feel the ground shift beneath us. Tonight, We have watched the spotlight go dark and felt the first stirring of the wave. But the wave is still expanding, still reaching, still searching. And what it finds when it reaches far enough, what it finds when it makes contact with something entangled, something quantum, something that has been waiting in another fold of reality for exactly this moment of connection, that is where we go next. For now, let the wave carry you. Let the threshold hold you in its silence. And pay attention, because somewhere in the dark, something that feels like you is paying attention back. You have felt it before. You know exactly what I am about to describe, even if you have never had the language for it. You are deep inside a dream, and someone is there with you. Not a face you recognize from your waking life, not a colleague, not a family member, not a friend, a stranger. And yet the word stranger feels like a lie the moment it forms in your mind, because something in the deepest architecture of your being recognizes this person with a certainty that bypasses logic entirely. You know them, not the way you know a name or a fact. You know them the way your lungs know air, the way your heart knows its own rhythm. You wake up, and the face fades, and the details dissolve like smoke in a sudden wind. But the feeling, that impossible, aching familiarity, stays with you for hours, sometimes days, sometimes years. You carry it like a signal you cannot decode, and you never stop wondering who that person was. To understand what might actually be happening in those moments, we need to travel to the strangest frontier of modern physics. We need to talk about entanglement. In 1935, Albert Einstein identified a prediction buried in the mathematics of quantum mechanics that disturbed him so profoundly he spent the rest of his life trying to prove it wrong. The prediction was this: when two particles interact and become linked through a quantum process, they enter a shared state. They become entangled. And once entangled, they remain connected, not through any wire, not through any signal, not through any force that travels through space, but through something more fundamental than space itself. Measure one particle and find it spinning clockwise, and its entangled partner, no matter how far away across a room, across an ocean, across the observable universe, will instantly be found spinning counterclockwise, not after a delay, not after a signal has had time to travel, instantly, as if distance does not exist. As if the two particles, despite appearing to be separate objects in separate locations, are in some deeper sense still one thing, one system, one reality, wearing two masks. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He meant it as a criticism. He believed it proved that quantum mechanics was incomplete, that something was missing from the theory, that the universe could not possibly be that strange. But experiment after experiment, decade after decade, proved him wrong. Entanglement is real. It has been measured. It has been confirmed across hundreds of kilometers of fiber optic cable and through open air between satellites and ground stations. Two things that have once been connected remain connected. And the connection is instantaneous, unbreakable, and completely independent of the distance between them. Now hold that thought and turn it inward. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. Each neuron connects to thousands of others through synapses, forming a network of such staggering complexity that it contains more potential connections than there are atoms in the known universe. And these neurons communicate not only through chemical signals and electrical impulses, but through quantum processes at the subcellular level. Microtubules within your neurons exhibit quantum coherence. Ion channels in your synapses operate at scales where quantum effects are not just possible, but unavoidable. Your brain, at its deepest level, is a quantum system. So here is the question that classical neuroscience is not yet brave enough to ask. If particles can become entangled across the vastness of space, and if your brain operates through quantum processes, is it possible that the neurons firing inside your skull while you dream are entangled not just with each other, but with something outside of you, with neurons in another mind, with a version of your own neural network that exists in a parallel configuration of reality? During the day, when the thalamus and prefrontal cortex hold the spotlight steady and your consciousness operates as a particle fixed, local, singular, this kind of connection would be drowned out. The noise of sensory input, the relentless demands of logical processing, the sheer volume of waking life would overwhelm any faint quantum whisper trying to reach you from across the entangled divide. It would be like trying to hear a single voice calling your name from the other side of a hurricane. But at night, the hurricane stops. The thalamus closes its gate. The prefrontal cortex releases its grip. The sensory world goes quiet. And in that profound, encompassing silence, the faintest signals suddenly become audible. Think of an old radio, the kind with a physical dial that you turn by hand, scanning through frequencies. During the day, your brain is tuned to one station, one frequency, one broadcast, the loud, clear, dominant signal of waking reality. But at night, as you drift through the quantum threshold and into sleep, the dial begins to turn on its own. The dominant station fades to static, and through that static, ghost signals begin to emerge. Faint at first, fragmented, a voice that is not quite a voice, an image that is not quite a memory, a feeling that does not belong to any experience you can name. These are the dreams that haunt you, not the ordinary ones, not the mundane replays of your daily anxieties, but the other ones, the ones that carry a weight and texture that your waking mind cannot manufacture. The city you have never visited, but whose streets you navigate with effortless certainty, turning left at the fountain, right at the old stone wall, knowing that the cafe is just around the corner before you see it. The conversation with a stranger whose words move you to tears, and when you wake, you cannot remember what was said, but you can still feel the impression of every syllable against your consciousness, like fingerprints on glass. The sudden shock of emotion, terror, euphoria, heartbreak, longing that erupts from nowhere in the middle of a dream and feels too large to have come from you alone, as if your nervous system is resonating with a feeling that originated somewhere else and arrived without traveling. What if these experiences are not fabrications? What if they are not your brain shuffling old data into new configurations? What if they are exactly what they feel like: transmissions? Live data from an entangled source, bleeding through the quantum silence of your sleeping mind. Consider what entanglement actually means when you strip away the mathematics and hold only the essence. It means that separation is, on some fundamental level, an illusion. It means that two things which appear to be apart can behave as one. It means that information, or something deeper than information, something more like state, more like being, can be shared across any distance without crossing the space between. Now, imagine two versions of you. One here, in this universe, in this bed, in this particular arrangement of choices and consequences that you call your life. And another, somewhere else in a reality that branched from yours at some moment of decision, some quantum fork in the road of existence. You share an origin. You share a structure. You share, at the most fundamental level, the same quantum signature. You were, in the language of physics, once the same system, and if entanglement means anything, it means you might still be connected. Picture two mirrors placed at the edges of a vast, dark ocean. There is no light between them, nothing visible, nothing measurable by any instrument that operates in the space between. But a single candle lit before one mirror appears, faintly, impossibly, in the surface of the other. Not because light has crossed the water, not because any signal has bridged the gap, but because the mirrors themselves are entangled two surfaces of the same deeper glass, reflecting each other not through space, but through the substrate beneath space. Your dream is one mirror, and somewhere, in some other fold of the quantum landscape, another dream is the other. This is what I call the quantum mirror, and it reframes everything you think you know about what happens when you sleep. That emotion you felt in last night's dream, the sudden, sourceless grief that made you wake with wet eyes and a heavy chest, what if it was not generated by your unconscious processing some forgotten wound? What if it was shared? What if a version of you, entangled with you at the quantum level, experienced a loss so profound that the feeling bled through the entangled connection and arrived in your dream as raw, unfiltered anguish? You felt it as yours because, in a sense, it is yours. The boundary between you and your quantum twin is not a wall, it is a membrane. And in sleep, that membrane becomes thin. Think about the nights you have jolted awake at 3 a.m, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding your bloodstream, and there is no reason for it. No nightmare you can remember, no sound that disturbed you. Just the sudden, violent sensation of being pulled out of one state and into another, as if something reached across an invisible distance and tugged at the thread that connects you to everything you cannot see. Neuroscience calls it a hypnic jerk, or a spike in cortisol, or a disruption in sleep architecture. And perhaps it is. But what if it is also something else? What if that midnight surge is an entanglement pulse? A moment when the connection between you and another version of yourself suddenly intensifies. When something happens on the other side that reverberates through the quantum link with such force that your sleeping body registers it as an emergency. You cannot prove this. Not yet. Perhaps not for decades. Perhaps not for centuries. The instruments do not exist. The theoretical framework is still in its infancy. But the experience exists. You know it exists because you have felt it. Every human being who has ever slept has felt it, that uncanny sense that the dream was not just a dream, that the stranger was not just a stranger, that the emotion came from somewhere beyond the borders of your own biography. And what makes this idea so difficult to dismiss is not just the anecdotal weight of billions of dreamers across the entire history of human consciousness. It is the physics itself. Quantum entanglement does not care about distance. It does not diminish with space. It does not weaken over time. If the connection exists, it exists absolutely as real and as immediate across the width of the multiverse as it is across the width of an atom. And if your consciousness truly becomes a wave when the observer sleeps, then that wave is not confined to the interior of your skull. It propagates, it extends, and where it extends, it can interact with other waves that share its frequency. Non-locality, the principle that entangled systems transcend spatial separation, is not a metaphor here. It is the mechanism. Your dreaming mind is non-local in a way that your waking mind can never be. Freed from the collapsed, particle state prison of observed reality, your sleeping consciousness extends into a space where the concept of here and there loses its authority. In that space, meeting yourself is not a paradox. It is a resonance. It is two tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency, each amplifying the other, each feeling the other's vibration, not as an external signal, but as an internal truth. And this is where the architecture becomes vast, because you are not entangled with just one other version of yourself. Every branching point, every quantum fork, every moment where reality could have gone one way or another has produced another configuration, another pattern, another mirror. The connections are not singular. They are layered, overlapping, interwoven, a web of quantum threads so dense and so extensive that what you experience as a single dream might actually be a symphony of entangled signals, arriving simultaneously from dozens, hundreds, perhaps an infinite number of parallel selves. Your dream is not a room with one ghost signal on one radio. Your dream is a theater, a vast, multi-layered, multi-dimensional theater where every seat is occupied by a version of you, and every version is dreaming, and every dream is bleeding into every other dream through the entangled connections that bind them all to the same original source. And the stranger in your sleep, the one whose face you cannot hold but whose presence you cannot forget, they are not a stranger. They never were. They are you wearing a different life, the way you might wear a different coat, shaped by different choices, scarred by different losses, illuminated by different joys, but entangled with you at a level so fundamental that no distance, no dimension, no wall between universes can sever the thread. You felt them because the thread is real. You remembered them because the entanglement does not forget. And tonight, when you cross the quantum threshold once more, and the spotlight goes dark, and the wave begins to expand, the connection will be waiting. It is always waiting, but one entangled thread is just the beginning. Because these threads do not exist in isolation. They weave together, they form patterns. They construct something that, if you could see it from far enough away, would look less like a web and more like a stage, an immense, impossible stage where every possible version of your life is being performed simultaneously, in parallel, in an architecture so vast that the mind can barely hold the shape of it. That stage has a name. It is the place where every dream, every dreamer, and every entangled connection converges into a single, breathtaking structure. And it is where we are going next. In 1957, a young physicist named Hugh Everett III sat in his office at Princeton University and committed what many of his colleagues considered an act of intellectual madness. He proposed an idea so radical, so sweeping in its implications, that his own doctoral advisor, the legendary John Wheeler, spent years trying to soften its edges before allowing it into the world. Everett looked at the same quantum equations that everyone else was looking at, the same mathematics that described particles existing in superpositions, in multiple states at once, until observation collapsed them into one, and he asked a question that no one else had been willing to ask. What if the wave function never collapses at all? What if, instead of one outcome being selected and all others vanishing, every possible outcome actually happens? What if the universe does not choose? What if it splits? This is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And its proposition is staggering in both its simplicity and its scale. Every time a quantum event occurs, every time a particle could go left or right, every time an atom could decay or not decay, every time any system at the subatomic level faces a fork in its path, the universe does not pick one road. It takes both. It takes all of them. Reality branches, silently and instantaneously, into parallel versions of itself, each one containing a complete, fully realized world in which a different outcome played out. Not metaphorically, not as a thought experiment. Actually, physically, the mathematics does not distinguish between the branch you experience and the branch you do not. They are equally real, equally valid, equally alive. When Everett first published this idea, the physics community largely ignored it. Some dismissed it as philosophy. Others found it too extravagant, too wasteful. Why should the universe create infinite copies of itself just to avoid the mystery of wave function collapse? But over the decades, something remarkable happened. The alternatives, the attempts to explain quantum mechanics without invoking multiple worlds, grew increasingly strained, increasingly awkward, increasingly loaded with assumptions that felt far more arbitrary than Everett's elegant, if terrifying, solution. Today, a significant and growing portion of the world's leading physicists accept the many worlds interpretation as not just plausible, but probable. The universe, it seems, is not a single story. It is a library, infinite, ever expanding, containing every story that could ever be written. And you are not a single character. You are every character. Every version of you that could exist does exist. Somewhere in the branching architecture of this incomprehensible library. The you who said yes when you said no. The you who stayed when you left. The you who took that road, that job, that hand extended to you in the dark of an uncertain moment. They are all real. They are all living their lives with the same conviction, the same solidity, the same unshakable sense of being the real one, the only one that you feel right now as you listen to these words. Now take this understanding and carry it into the dark. Carry it past the quantum threshold, past the point where the thalamus closes its gate and the prefrontal cortex releases its grip, and your consciousness transforms from a particle into a wave. Because if the many worlds interpretation is true, if reality genuinely branches into infinite parallel paths, then the wave your sleeping mind becomes is not expanding into empty space. It is expanding into a landscape already crowded with other versions of reality, other branches, other worlds that split from yours at every decision point, every quantum event, every fork in the road of existence, stretching all the way back to the beginning of time. And I want you to consider the possibility that your thalamus knows this. During waking life, the thalamus acts as a filter, a gate, a reducer of infinity into the manageable stream of a single reality. But we have already established that in sleep, the thalamus changes its behavior dramatically. It stops filtering external input. It shifts its firing patterns. It enters oscillatory states that neuroscience has measured but never fully explained. Slow, rhythmic pulses that sweep through the brain like tidal waves. What if these oscillations are not random? What if they are not merely the housekeeping rhythms of a resting organ? What if the thalamus, freed from its daytime duty of collapsing reality into one channel, begins to do something else entirely? What if it begins to tune? Imagine a radio dial, not the digital kind that jumps between preset stations, but the old analog kind, the kind you turn slowly with your fingers, feeling the frequencies slide beneath your touch. As you turn it, you pass through static, then catch a fragment of music from a distant city, then more static, then a voice speaking a language you almost recognize, then static again, then something that sounds like your own voice saying words you have never spoken. The stations are not being created by the radio. They already exist, broadcasting continuously, filling the air with overlapping signals. The radio simply selects which one you hear. Your dreaming thalamus is that radio dial, and the stations are the parallel branches of the multiverse. This is why your dreams are strange. Not strange in the way that a random image generator produces strange images, arbitrary, disconnected, meaningless. Strange in a very specific way. Strange because the physics are slightly wrong, because the gravity of the emotional landscape does not match the gravity you are used to, because the social rules are subtly different, because time moves in directions it should not move, because the architecture of the world you are moving through follows a logic that is internally consistent but externally alien, as if you have stepped into a reality that branched from yours long ago and has been evolving under slightly different conditions ever since. You have experienced this. You know the feeling. You are in a house in a dream, and it is not your house, and you have never seen it before, and yet you know where every room is. You know that the kitchen is down the hall to the left. You know that the back door sticks, and you have to lift it slightly to get it open. You know that the view from the upstairs window shows a garden with a tree that flowers in spring, and you know what those flowers smell like. And the knowledge is not intellectual, it is embodied, cellular, bone deep. You belong there. You have always belonged there. And when you wake, the loss of that place hits you with a grief that makes no sense. Because how can you miss somewhere you have never been? But what if you have been there? What if you do live there, not in this branch, not in this particular thread of the universal tapestry, but in another? What if the dream was not a fabrication, but a window, a live feed, transmitted across the entangled connection between your consciousness and the consciousness of the you who chose differently, who turned left instead of right at some critical junction 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, and ended up in that house, in that city, in that life? Have you ever dreamt of a home you have never lived in, but felt you belonged there? Hold that question. Do not answer it quickly. Let it sit in the center of your chest and resonate, because the answer matters more than you think. That feeling of belonging is not nostalgia for something imaginary. It is recognition. It is your consciousness, spread wide in its wave state, tuning into a frequency adjacent to your own and receiving, for a few vivid moments, the lived experience of another branch. You carry a passport you did not know you had. Every night, when you cross the quantum threshold, it is stamped. You travel without moving. You arrive without leaving. And the places you visit are not less real than the room where your body lies sleeping. They are differently real, governed by different outcomes of the same fundamental laws, populated by versions of people you know who made different choices and became different people. And at the center of each of those worlds stands someone who shares your fingerprints and your heartbeat and your deepest, most private sense of self. This is the multiverse theater, and you are not watching a movie. You are watching a live performance. Imagine a theater so vast that its walls disappear into darkness in every direction. There is no ceiling, only depth, stretching upward into infinity. And instead of a single screen, there are thousands, millions, an uncountable number of screens arranged in every dimension, each one showing a different scene, a different life, a different version of the same story, being played out by a different version of the same actor. On one screen, you are a child again, but the childhood is different, warmer or colder, or colored by an event that never happened in your timeline. On another, you are older than you are now, living in a city built on choices you abandoned decades ago. On another, you are unrecognizable, shaped by a life so divergent from yours that only the faintest echo of your shared origin remains, visible only in the way you tilt your head when you think, or the way your hands move when you speak. And you are not sitting in the audience. You never were. You are standing at the center of this infinite theater, and every screen is connected to you by a thread you can feel but cannot see. And when something happens on one of those screens, when the you in that branch falls in love or loses someone, or stands at the edge of something terrifying and leaps, the thread vibrates, and you feel it. This is emotional resonance. This is why you wake from certain dreams with tears on your face and an ache in your chest that belongs to no experience in your waking autobiography. The grief is real. The joy is real. The terror, the tenderness, the breathless exhilaration, all of it is real. It simply did not originate here. It traveled along the entangled thread from a screen in the theater where another version of you is living a moment so intense that the feeling could not be contained in a single branch. It spilled over, it bled through, and your sleeping mind, wide open in its wave state, received it the way a still lake receives a stone with ripples that spread across your entire emotional surface and do not stop when you open your eyes. This is why some dreams change you, not in the way that a pleasant fantasy lifts your mood for an hour or a nightmare leaves a residue of unease that fades by breakfast. Some dreams alter you at a structural level. You wake up and something has shifted. A relationship feels different. A decision you were struggling with suddenly feels clear. A fear you have carried for years has lost its weight, as if someone reached into your chest while you slept and loosened a knot you could not reach. You did not process this in therapy. You did not work through it in meditation. It happened in the theater, on a screen you cannot remember, in a branch where a version of you faced the same knot and untied it. And the resolution echoed through the entanglement and arrived in your body as a change you cannot explain but cannot deny. The prism is another way to see it. A single beam of white light enters a prism and exits as a spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, 1,000 shades fanning out from a single source. Your consciousness is that white light. During the day, it is focused into a single beam, coherent, directed, powerful, but narrow. In sleep, it enters the prism of the quantum threshold and fans out into its component frequencies, each one corresponding to a different branch, a different version, a different color, of the life you could have lived. The dream is not one color. It is the whole spectrum, shimmering and shifting, and your sleeping mind moves through it like a hand passing slowly through a rainbow, feeling each hue as a different temperature, a different texture, a different emotional wavelength. And here is what begins to shift everything. Because so far, we have spoken about watching, receiving, feeling the resonance of other branches as they play out on their screens. But the theatre is not a cinema. The screens are not behind glass. There is no separation between the audience and the performance, because there is no audience. There are only performers. Every version of you on every screen is as conscious, as present, as real as you are. And the entangled threads that connect you do not carry information in only one direction. If you can feel them, they can feel you. And if the wave function of your sleeping consciousness can tune into their frequency and receive the echo of their experience, then it follows it necessarily, inescapably follows that there is a possibility far more profound than passive observation. There is the possibility of interaction, of influence, of stepping out of your seat in the darkened theatre and walking, not toward a screen, but onto the stage itself. That possibility has a name. It has been practiced, studied, and reported by dreamers across every culture and every century of human history. And it changes the rules of everything we have discussed so far, because it suggests that the wave function is not just something that happens to you when you sleep. It is something you can learn to navigate, something you can learn to direct, something that transforms the dreamer from a passive receiver of quantum echoes into an active traveler in the architecture of infinite possibility. That is where we go next. The stage is set, the theater surrounds you, and for the first time, you are going to stand up. Everything we have explored so far, the wave function of sleeping consciousness, the entangled threads connecting you to parallel selves, the vast theater of branching realities playing out on infinite screens, all of it has described you as a passenger, a receiver, a wave expanding into the dark, touching other waves, feeling their resonance, but ultimately drifting. You have been asleep in every sense of the word, carried by currents you did not choose through a landscape you did not design. But now something changes. Now we talk about the moment the dreamer opens their eyes inside the dream, and everything transforms. To understand why this moment matters, we need to return to the laboratory. We need to return to the particle. The observer effect is one of the most rigorously demonstrated and least understood phenomena in all of physics. It is not a theory. It is not a hypothesis waiting for confirmation. It is an experimental fact, repeated thousands of times in laboratories around the world, and it says something about reality that most people, even most scientists, have not fully absorbed. The act of observation changes what is observed, not as a metaphor, not as a philosophical abstraction, physically, measurably, undeniably. When a quantum system exists in superposition, when a particle occupies multiple states simultaneously, spinning in every direction at once, existing in every possible position at the same time, it remains in that state of infinite potential until something observes it, until something measures it, until conscious attention enters the equation. And at that precise moment, the superposition collapses. The many become one. The possible becomes actual. The particle chooses, or is forced to choose, a single, definite, concrete state. The observation does not merely reveal what was already there. This is the part that breaks most people's intuition, and it is the part that matters most. Before the measurement, the particle was not secretly in one state, while appearing to be in many. It was genuinely, physically, mathematically, in all states at once. The observation does not uncover reality. It creates it. The watcher does not find the answer. The watcher forces the answer into existence. Now take this principle, this hard, tested, unyielding principle of physics, and carry it into the deepest chamber of your sleeping mind. In a normal dream, your consciousness drifts through a fluid, shifting landscape that obeys no fixed rules. Walls melt into oceans, faces morph between identities. You are in a building that is simultaneously your school and a hospital and a place that exists nowhere on Earth. And none of this troubles you because you are not observing in the quantum sense. You are experiencing, yes. You are feeling, moving, reacting, but you are not aware. There is no measurement happening, no conscious attention turning toward the dream itself and asking the question that changes everything: is this real? Am I dreaming? The dreamer in an ordinary dream is like a particle in superposition. Every possibility coexists. Every narrative flows into every other narrative. The dream is a probability wave, uncollapsed, unlimited, and utterly beyond control. And then, in a moment that countless dreamers across every century and every culture have described with the same breathless wonder, something shifts. A detail catches your attention. Perhaps you notice that the light is wrong, too golden, too liquid, falling at an angle that no sun in your waking world has ever produced. Perhaps you look at your hands and see that your fingers are the wrong number, or the wrong length, or translucent at the edges. Perhaps you try to read a sign and the letters rearrange themselves before your eyes. And in that instant, a thought crystallizes in the center of your awareness with a clarity so sharp it feels like a blade cutting through fabric. I am dreaming. 2 words. That is all it takes. 2 words, and you become the observer. What happens next is one of the most extraordinary experiences available to a human mind. The dream, which moments ago was a vague and drifting fog of half-formed images and borrowed emotions, snaps into focus with a vividness that defies description. The colors do not just become clearer, they become more saturated, more luminous, more real than any color you have seen with your waking eyes. The textures of surfaces become so detailed that you can feel the grain of wood beneath your fingertips, the individual threads in the fabric of a curtain, the temperature of air against your skin with a precision that your daytime senses have never achieved. The world around you does not just sharpen, it solidifies, it crystallizes. It goes from a watercolor smudge to a diamond-cut reality in the space between one heartbeat and the next. And this is not poetry. This is neuroscience. Studies using EEG and fMRI on lucid dreamers have shown that the moment of lucidity triggers a dramatic shift in brain activity. The prefrontal cortex, that same region that holds the spotlight steady during waking life, that same region that goes quiet during ordinary sleep, suddenly reactivates. Gamma wave activity surges across the brain, the same high-frequency neural oscillation associated with peak states of conscious awareness, focused attention, and sensory integration. The brain, in the moment of lucid recognition, begins to operate with a precision and intensity that rivals and, in some studies, exceeds its waking state. You have not merely become aware that you are dreaming. you have reignited the observer. You have switched the measurement device back on inside a quantum system that was existing in superposition, and the superposition collapses. Think of a glass wall covered in thick fog. You have been staring through it for what feels like hours, seeing nothing but vague shapes, dim movements, shadows that could be anything. And then someone reaches out and wipes the glass clean in a single swift stroke. The clarity is not gradual, it is instantaneous, it is total. And what you see on the other side is not what you expected. It is sharper, deeper, more intricate than anything the fog had suggested. That is what lucidity feels like. The fog was not hiding a lesser reality. It was hiding a greater one. Or think of a storm, a wild, chaotic tempest of wind and rain and lightning, where nothing holds its shape and nothing stays in one place, and the noise is so overwhelming that you cannot hear your own thoughts. And then imagine that someone looks at the storm, really looks at it with such focus, such unwavering intent, that the storm freezes, not calms, not subsides, freezes. Every raindrop suspended in midair, every bolt of lightning locked in its arc, the chaos transformed in an instant into a sculpture of impossible beauty and absolute stillness. That is what happens to the dream when the observer wakes up inside it. The probability wave freezes into a chosen state. The fluid becomes solid. The chaos becomes architecture. And here is where the power reveals itself. Because in the quantum world, the observer does not merely collapse the wave function into a random state. The nature of the observation influences the outcome. How you measure a particle affects which state it collapses into. The observer is not passive. The observer is participatory. And in a lucid dream, you are the only observer. You are the only measurement device. And the reality you are observing is being generated by your own neural architecture, which means that the nature of your attention, the direction of your focus, the content of your intention, the clarity of your will directly shapes what the collapsed dream reality becomes. You look at the ground and decide it should be sand, and it is sand. You look at the sky and decide it should be full of stars, and stars ignite across the darkness like someone struck a match against the fabric of space. You decide to fly, and the physics of the dream reorganize themselves around your intention, and gravity releases you, not because you have broken a rule, but because in this collapsed state, you are the one writing the rules. You decide to speak to the stranger from your earlier dreams, the one whose face you could never hold, and they turn toward you, and for the first time, their features are stable, clear, permanent, because your observation has collapsed them from a wave of possibility into a definite, singular presence. This is not fantasy. This is the architecture of will operating within a neural environment that has no external constraints. During waking life, your intentions must contend with the physical laws of a shared consensus reality. You can intend to fly, but gravity does not care about your intentions. But in the lucid dream, there is no consensus reality. There is no shared physics. There is only you, the observer, the measurer, the one whose conscious attention collapses the wave and the infinitely responsive field of neural possibility that constitutes the dream. Your will becomes the law of physics. Your focus becomes the force of gravity. Your intention becomes the architecture of the world. And this raises a question so provocative that I need you to hold it carefully, because it cuts in directions that extend far beyond the boundaries of sleep. If you can change the physics of your dream just by knowing it is a dream, if the mere act of conscious awareness transforms a chaotic, uncontrolled experience into a vivid, responsive, architected reality that obeys your will, then what does that tell you about the limits of your mind in the waking world? What does it say about the relationship between attention and reality? What does it say about what might be possible if you could bring even a fraction of that lucid clarity, that precise and undivided focus into your waking hours? This is the Creator's paradox. In a lucid dream, you are both the inhabitant of the universe and its architect. You walk through a world that feels external, that has weight and texture and depth and independent existence, and yet it is being generated entirely by you. You are the dreamer and the dream, the observer and the observed, the scientist and the experiment, the question and the answer. This dual existence, this state of being simultaneously inside the creation and in control of it, is not just a curiosity of sleep neuroscience. It is a mirror held up to the deepest question in consciousness studies. Are you, in your waking life, also both the inhabitant and the architect of your experienced reality? Is the sharp line between the world out there and the mind in here as solid as it feels? Or is it, like the fog on the glass, something that the right kind of attention could wipe away? Lucid dreamers across history have reported something else, something that adds another layer to this already vertiginous experience. When you sustain lucidity, when you hold the observer state steady within the dream for extended periods, the nature of time itself begins to behave strangely. A dream that your sleeping body experiences over the course of 5 minutes of REM sleep can feel, from the inside, like it lasted hours. Entire days can be lived in the space of moments. Conversations can unfold with a richness and duration that would be impossible within the measured time of your sleep cycle. And sometimes the reverse occurs, an event that feels instantaneous. A single flash of experience turns out to have contained layers of detail that would take hours to describe. The clock inside the lucid dream does not tick the way your bedside clock ticks. Seconds stretch, hours compress. Sequence becomes negotiable. And the more aware you become inside the dream, the more firmly you establish yourself as the observer, the more apparent it becomes that time, like space, like gravity, like physics itself, is not a fixed backdrop against which the dream occurs. It is another element of the dream that responds to your consciousness. And this should trouble you in the most productive possible way. Because if time inside the collapsed, observed dream state behaves differently from time in waking reality, if the observer's awareness can stretch a moment into an eternity or compress an eternity into a moment, then time is not what you think it is. Time is not the rigid, forward-marching, irreversible arrow that your waking consciousness insists it must be. Time, at least within the architecture of the dreaming mind, is fluid, malleable, responsive to observation in exactly the way that quantum mechanics says it should be. But classical physics says it cannot be. The lucid dream, it turns out, is not just a playground for the will. It is a laboratory for the nature of time itself. And what that laboratory reveals, what it has been revealing to dreamers for thousands of years, and what physics is only now beginning to have the language to describe, is that the arrow of time may be the deepest illusion of them all. One that breaks apart the moment you stop taking it for granted. One that we must now examine with the same unflinching attention that woke us up inside the dream in the first place. The observer is awake. The dream is collapsed into clarity, and the clock on the wall has started moving in a direction no one expected. There is a question that has haunted you since childhood, though you may never have put it into words. You felt it on those mornings when you woke from a dream that had lasted what seemed like years, a dream in which you lived an entire arc of experience, met people, built relationships, watched seasons change, grew old in a place that felt as solid and as permanent as anything in your waking life. And then you opened your eyes and looked at the clock and realized that only 20 minutes had passed. 20 minutes. The length of a shower, the time it takes to boil water and drink a cup of tea. And yet inside those 20 minutes, you had lived, not imagined, not glimpsed, lived, with a density of experience and emotion that your waking hours, spread across their full and measured span, rarely match. How is that possible? How can the mind contain years inside minutes? How can the clock on the wall and the clock inside the dream disagree so completely about something as fundamental as the passage of time? The answer begins not in neuroscience, but in physics. And it begins with a revelation that is, even by the extraordinary standards of what we have already explored together, deeply and permanently unsettling. Since Einstein published his theories of relativity in the early 20th century, physics has known that time is not what it appears to be. It is not a river flowing in one direction. It is not an arrow shot from the past toward the future. It is not a universal metronome ticking at the same rate for everyone and everything. Time, Einstein showed, is relative. It stretches and compresses depending on speed and gravity. A clock on a mountaintop ticks faster than a clock in a valley. A clock on a spaceship traveling near the speed of light ticks slower than a clock on Earth. These are not abstractions. These effects have been measured with atomic clocks on airplanes, on satellites, in particle accelerators. Time is elastic. Time bends. Time is not the rigid scaffold that your daily experience insists it must be. But relativity was only the beginning. When physicists pushed deeper into the quantum realm, into the subatomic world where the rules of reality reveal their true and startling nature, they discovered something even more radical. At the quantum level, the very concept of time flowing from past to future begins to lose its meaning. The fundamental equations of quantum mechanics are time-symmetric. They work equally well whether time moves forward or backward. There is no arrow built into the mathematics. There is no preferred direction. The subatomic world does not know which way the clock is supposed to run. This led to a concept that has reshaped the way physicists think about the nature of temporal existence. It is called the block universe, and its proposition is this: past, present, and future are not separate categories of reality. They are not stages on a journey where the past has vanished and the future has not yet arrived. They are all equally real. They all exist simultaneously. Imagine the entirety of time, from the first fraction of a second after the birth of the universe to its final, distant moment of heat death, laid out like a landscape, not unfolding, not progressing, just there, complete, whole, every moment that has ever occurred and every moment that ever will occur, existing together in a single, four-dimensional structure where the distinction between was, is, and will be is purely a matter of perspective, of where you happen to be standing in the landscape, of which slice of the block your consciousness is currently illuminating. Your waking mind rejects this. It must reject this, because the waking mind is a survival instrument, and survival requires sequence. You need to know that the threat comes before the escape. That hunger comes before eating. That cause comes before effect. Your prefrontal cortex, that relentless engine of linear narrative, takes the block and slices it into a strip, a film strip, and feeds it to your awareness, one frame at a time, always in the same direction, always at the same speed. This is the experience of time you call normal. This is the clock on the wall. Frame after frame after frame, never skipping, never reversing, never accelerating, never stopping. But when you sleep, the projector changes, the prefrontal cortex powers down, the thalamus stops synchronizing your neural activity with the external rhythms of light and sound and physical cause and effect. The brain's internal clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that tiny cluster of cells that ties your biology to the 24-hour rotation of the Earth, continues to run, but its authority over your conscious experience weakens dramatically. And the dreaming mind, freed from the obligation to process time as a sequence of equally spaced frames, begins to move through the block in an entirely different way. This is why a dream can contain years inside minutes. Your dreaming consciousness is not speeding up the film. It is not fast-forwarding through a linear sequence. It is accessing the block directly. It is moving through the temporal landscape the way you might move through a physical landscape, not along a single road at a fixed speed, but freely, in any direction, at any pace, lingering in some regions and leaping across others, experiencing time not as a line, but as a territory to be explored. Think of a single drop of water falling from the tip of a leaf into a still pond. In the waking world, you would experience this as a brief event, a fraction of a second of falling, a tiny splash, a ripple that spreads and fades. But imagine that you could enter the drop. Imagine that your consciousness could shrink to the scale of a molecule within that falling bead of water and experience its internal time. The hydrogen bonds forming and breaking millions of times per second. The rotation of individual molecules, each one carrying the memory of every ocean it has ever been part of, every cloud, every river, every tear. From inside the drop, the fall is not a fraction of a second. It is an epoch. It is an odyssey. The drop contains the entire history of the ocean, compressed into a volume smaller than a pearl. Your dream is that drop. From the outside, from the perspective of the clock on your bedside table, it lasts minutes. From the inside, from the perspective of the consciousness moving through the temporal block without the constraints of the waking projector, it can last a lifetime. And now, we must confront the most disorienting possibility of all. If the equations of quantum mechanics are truly time-symmetric, if the mathematics does not distinguish between past and future, then the block universe is not just a landscape your dreaming mind can wander through. It is a landscape your dreaming mind can wander through in any direction, including backward, including sideways, including into regions of the temporal block that your waking mind labels the future and treats as non-existent until they arrive on the film strip, one frame at a time. This is quantum retrocausality. It is the idea, supported by a growing body of theoretical work and a handful of deeply controversial but carefully conducted experiments, that influence can flow backward through time, that an event in the future can affect an event in the past. That causation is not a one-way street, but a two-way channel that only appears to flow in one direction because of the limitations of the observer limitations that are imposed by the waking prefrontal cortex and released the moment it powers down for sleep. You have had dreams that came true. Do not dismiss this. Do not apologize for it. Do not immediately retreat into the comfortable explanation that it was coincidence or selective memory or pattern matching after the fact. Yes, those explanations are possible, but consider, just for a moment, the other possibility. Consider that your dreaming mind, moving freely through the temporal block without the waking brain's insistence on linear progression, simply wandered into a coordinate of time that your waking self had not yet reached. The dream did not predict the future. There is no prediction involved when you can visit a place directly. You did not foresee what would happen. You were there. You experienced it. And then you woke up, and the prefrontal cortex reasserted its linear authority, and the experience was filed under dream rather than memory, because the waking mind has no category for a memory that has not happened yet. Frame the dream state as a needle on a record player. During the day, the needle sits in its groove and moves forward, one revolution at a time, one song at a time, in the order the album was pressed. But at night, someone lifts the needle, and instead of setting it back down in the next groove, they hold it above the spinning disc, and the needle can descend anywhere. Track 1, track 7. The hidden track at the end that plays backward, the silence between songs where something is embedded that you can only hear if you know how to listen. Your dreaming consciousness does not skip to the future. It simply accesses a different coordinate of a time block that already contains every track. Have you ever lived an entire lifetime in a single night of sleep? I am not asking if you have had a long dream. I am asking if you have experienced what dreamers throughout history have described with a consistency that defies cultural boundaries, a dream in which you were born or began as a young person and grew and loved and built a family and watched your children become strangers with familiar eyes and grew old and felt the weight of decades in your joints and carried the accumulated wisdom and grief and joy of an entire human life within your sleeping body. And then you woke up, and the life was gone, and you lay in the dark and grieved for a family you never had in this world, for children whose names are fading even as you reach for them, for a partner whose face you will forget by noon no matter how desperately you try to hold it. This experience is not rare. It is not a disorder. It is not a malfunction of the sleeping brain. It is what happens when a consciousness, unbound from linear time, enters a region of the temporal block and lives there fully, completely, with the same density of experience and emotional reality that you bring to your waking life for what feels like an entire span of human existence. The clock says 8 hours. The mind says 80 years, and both are telling the truth. This is the time paradox. In the quantum realm of sleep, you are not locked into the single temporal coordinate that your waking identity occupies. You are, in a sense that is more than metaphorical but less than fully understood, spread across the block. You are the child you were. You are the elder you will become. You are the version of yourself that exists at every point along the timeline, and in the dream state, these versions do not line up in sequence. They coexist. They overlap. They bleed into each other the way colors bleed at the edge of a sunset. so that you can be simultaneously young and old, experienced and innocent, at the beginning of something and at the end of it. And the dream holds all of these states without contradiction, because it has been freed from the tyranny of the arrow. Think of a clock left out in the desert sun, not a digital clock, but an old mechanical one, with gears and springs and hands that sweep in their predetermined circles. As the heat intensifies, the metal softens, the gears slow, the hands begin to droop, bending under their own weight, curving away from the face of the clock in shapes that no longer have anything to do with measuring seconds or minutes or hours. The clock has not stopped. It has melted. It has become something else, something that still contains the idea of time within its structure, but is no longer bound to express it in the rigid, circular, mechanical way it was designed for. Your dreaming brain is that melting clock. It still contains time. It still processes temporal experience. But the form that experience takes is fluid, organic, liberated from the mechanics of sequence. And here is what should stagger you. The amount of experiential data generated by a single night of dreaming, when that dreaming includes temporal expansion, non-linear navigation of the time block, emotional processing of events that span perceived decades, and simultaneous access to multiple temporal coordinates, is almost incomprehensibly vast. Your brain, a 3-pound organ made of water and fat and electrochemical signals, is somehow managing to generate, process, integrate, and store a volume of experience that, measured in subjective time, dwarfs anything your waking hours produce. It is doing this every night. It has been doing this every night since you were born, and it does it so seamlessly, so efficiently, so invisibly that you wake up and eat breakfast and never once stop to wonder how a biological organ the size of 2 fists is accomplishing a computational feat that would humble the most advanced information processing system ever, built by human hands. How does it do this? What architecture could possibly support this kind of processing? What kind of computational system could take the raw, non-linear, temporally expanded, emotionally dense, multi-dimensional data of the dream and weave it into the coherent fabric of a continued consciousness without collapsing under the sheer weight of information? The answer, it turns out, may have been hiding in a field that has spent the last 3 decades racing toward a technology that mirrors, with eerie precision, the very processes we have been describing. A technology built on superposition, on entanglement, on the ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously, and to process not one possibility at a time, but all possibilities at once. Your brain, during sleep, may be operating as something that science is only now learning to build with silicon and superconductors. Something that processes information not in the classical, linear, 1 bit at a time manner of your waking cognition, but in the quantum manner holistically, simultaneously, in a way that turns the impossible into the inevitable. The melting clock is still keeping time, but it is keeping time in a language that only a very specific kind of computer can read. And that computer has been running inside your skull since the day you were born. Your brain is consuming roughly 12 watts of power right now. 12 watts. That is less than the dim bulb inside your refrigerator, less than the standby light on your television. less than the energy required to keep a single compact fluorescent lamp glowing in a hallway closet. And with that 12 watts, this organ, this soft, wet, unremarkable-looking mass of tissue that you could hold in your two cupped hands, is simultaneously regulating your heartbeat, managing your breathing, processing the meaning of every word you are hearing right now, maintaining your balance, monitoring your immune system, filtering your sensory input, retrieving memories, constructing predictions, generating emotions, and sustaining the continuous, unbroken stream of conscious experience that you call being alive. It is doing all of this at once, without interruption, without crashing, without overheating, without requiring a cooling system that fills a warehouse or an electrical supply that could power a city block. Now consider the most powerful classical supercomputer ever built by human engineering. It occupies thousands of square feet. It consumes megawatts of electricity, enough to power tens of thousands of homes. It requires elaborate cooling systems to keep its processors from melting under the heat of their own calculations. And despite all of this infrastructure, despite all of this power, despite decades of exponential progress in computational speed and efficiency, it cannot do what your brain does in a single second of ordinary waking life. It cannot generate conscious experience. It cannot dream. It cannot take 12 watts of power and construct, from nothing, a complete, immersive, multi-sensory simulation of reality, so convincing that the person experiencing it cannot distinguish it from the waking world. And yet, every night, that is precisely what your brain does. Every night, during the rapid eye movement cycles of sleep, your 12-watt biological processor constructs entire worlds. Not abstract representations, not wireframe sketches, complete, saturated, emotionally rich, physically convincing worlds, populated with autonomous-seeming characters who speak in voices you have never heard, in rooms built with architectural detail you never consciously designed, under skies lit by light sources that obey optical rules your waking mind never calculated. The computational demands of this feat are, by any measure, staggering, and they are being met by an organ that runs on less power than a nightlight. How? How is this possible? For most of the 20th century, neuroscience operated under a model that treated the brain as a classical computer. Neurons were switches on or off, firing or not firing, and cognition was the product of these switches operating in sequence, passing electrical and chemical signals along predetermined pathways. It was a model borrowed from the digital computers that were being invented at the same time, and it was elegant, intuitive, and enormously productive. It explained a great deal about how the brain processes information during waking life. But it could never explain dreams. It could never explain how a classical network of biological switches, operating at the relatively sluggish speed of electrochemical transmission signals, traveling at most a few hundred miles per hour along fatty, insulated axons, could generate the sheer volume, speed, and complexity of dreaming experience. The bandwidth does not match. The processing speed does not match. The energy budget does not match. Something else is happening. Something that classical neuroscience, with its on-off switches and its sequential processing and its neat circuit diagrams, does not have the architecture to describe. In the 1990s, two men from very different worlds arrived at the same radical conclusion. One was Roger Penrose, a mathematical physicist of such towering reputation that his work on black holes and space-time singularities had earned him a Nobel Prize and the admiration of Stephen Hawking. The other was Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist who had spent decades studying the structures inside cells that most biologists dismissed as mere scaffolding. Together, they proposed a theory that has been debated, attacked, ridiculed, and increasingly grudgingly, carefully, with the slow caution of a scientific establishment confronting an idea that threatens its foundations taken seriously. The theory is called orchestrated objective reduction, and it says that your brain is not a classical computer, it is a quantum one. At the center of this theory are structures called microtubules. They exist inside every neuron in your brain. Tiny, hollow cylinders made of a protein called tubulin, arranged in lattices of extraordinary geometric precision. For decades, biology treated them as structural elements, the internal skeleton of the cell, no more interesting than the beams inside a wall. Hameroff looked closer. He found that the tubulin proteins within microtubules can exist in multiple conformational states simultaneously. They can, in the language of quantum mechanics, be in superposition. And because of their geometric arrangement, their lattice structure, their hollow core, their isolation from the thermal noise that normally destroys quantum effects in biological systems, they can maintain this superposition long enough for quantum computations to occur. Not metaphorical computations, not computations by analogy, actual quantum information processing, operating on the same principles that physicists and engineers are now spending billions of dollars trying to harness in artificial quantum computers made of supercooled silicon and trapped ions. But the microtubules do it at body temperature. They do it in a wet, warm, chaotic biological environment. And they do it in every single one of your 86 billion neurons, each of which contains millions of microtubules, each of which contains thousands of tubulin proteins capable of quantum superposition. The numbers are almost impossible to hold in your mind. The total quantum computational capacity of the brain, if the OR theory is correct, exceeds anything we have ever built or imagined building by orders of magnitude so large that comparison becomes meaningless. Your 12-watt brain, humming quietly inside its bone case, may be performing more quantum operations in a single second than the total number of classical operations performed by every computer on Earth combined. And it gets stranger, because the microtubules are not the only site of quantum activity in the brain. At the synapses, the tiny gaps between neurons where signals jump from one cell to the next, something happens that classical neuroscience has always found slightly troubling. The signal crosses the gap faster than it should. The mechanism involves neurotransmitter molecules being released from one neuron, drifting across the synaptic cleft and binding to receptors on the next neuron. But the timing is often too fast, too precise, too reliable for a process that depends on the random diffusion of molecules through fluid. Some researchers have proposed that quantum tunneling, the phenomenon where a particle passes through a barrier that classical physics says it cannot cross, by essentially existing on both sides of the barrier, simultaneously plays a role in synaptic transmission. The signal does not just drift across the gap, it tunnels through it. It takes a shortcut through the quantum substrate of reality, arriving at its destination faster than the speed of biological electricity would normally allow. If this is true, then the brain's communication network is not a system of roads along which cars travel at a fixed speed limit. It is a system of quantum bridges where information appears at its destination without having to cross the space between. The implications for processing speed are revolutionary. The implications for the dream state are profound, because during REM sleep, synaptic activity does not decrease. In many regions of the brain, it intensifies. The visual cortex fires with the same vigor as it does during waking sight. The emotional centers of the limbic system burn with activity that often exceeds waking levels. The hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure responsible for memory consolidation, engages in furious, rapid-fire communication with cortical regions across the brain. All of this activity is being mediated by synapses. And if those synapses are using quantum tunneling, then the brain during REM sleep is operating a quantum network at peak capacity, a biological quantum internet of such speed and bandwidth that the massive parallel processing required to generate an entire simulated reality in real time becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Think of a network of fiber optic cables spanning the cosmos. Not the internet as it exists today, limited by the speed of light, constrained by physical distance, slowed by the bottlenecks of routers and switches, but a quantum network where every node is connected to every other node instantaneously, where information does not travel because it does not need to, where the entire network operates as a single unified system processing all inputs simultaneously. Now shrink that network down to 3 pounds. Fold it into the space between your ears, power it with 12 watts, and set it running. That is your brain during a dream. This is why the superposition of thought is not just a theoretical possibility in the dream state, but a felt experience. In a dream, you can be in 2 places at once, standing in a room and simultaneously watching yourself stand in that room from above, because the quantum brain has not yet collapsed the superposition into a single output. You can hold 2 contradictory ideas without discomfort, knowing that the person in front of you is both your mother and a stranger, both alive and dead, both speaking and silent, because quantum computation does not require binary resolution. It operates in superposition natively. It processes multiple states, not as a special trick, but as its default mode. During waking life, the thalamic filter and the prefrontal cortex collapse these superpositions into single, definite, classical outputs. One location, one identity, one timeline, because survival in the physical world requires definite answers. But during sleep, when the collapse mechanism powers down, the quantum computer runs unconstrained. It processes in parallel across every possible state simultaneously. And the dream is not a story the brain is telling you. The dream is the raw output of a quantum supercomputer operating at full capacity, solving equations that your classical waking mind does not have the architecture to even formulate, let alone solve. What if your dreams are not just stories? What if they are the most advanced software in the universe, running a simulation not of what has happened, but of what might happen, what could happen, what needs to happen for you to survive and adapt and grow? The emotional equations that you cannot solve while awake, the unresolved grief, the unprocessed fear, the relationship dynamics too complex for linear analysis, the survival scenarios too multifaceted for sequential evaluation. These are handed to the quantum processor when the classical system goes offline, and the quantum processor does what quantum processors do. It does not evaluate possibilities one at a time. It evaluates all of them at once. It holds every outcome in superposition, It lets them interfere with each other, amplifying the probable, cancelling the impossible, converging on solutions that the waking mind will receive as intuition, as gut feeling, as the inexplicable sense that you know what to do, even though you cannot explain why. This is quantum efficiency. This is why evolution has not discarded sleep, despite its enormous cost to survival. The hours of vulnerability, the loss of vigilance, the complete surrender of motor control and environmental awareness. Sleep is not a shutdown. It is an upgrade. It is the brain switching from classical processing to quantum processing, from sequential analysis to parallel computation, from the limited bandwidth of conscious, collapsed, particle state cognition to the unlimited bandwidth of superposition state quantum computation. And the return on this investment, the solutions generated, the emotional integrations achieved, the predictive simulations run, the creative connections forged is so vast that any organism which sacrificed it would be hopelessly outcompeted by organisms that retained it. You are not resting when you sleep. You are computing. You are running the most sophisticated information processing system that nature has ever assembled. And you are running it at a level of performance that makes your waking cognition look like an abacus next to a quantum supercomputer. But here is where the architecture leads somewhere unexpected. Because a quantum computer does not just process faster than a classical one, it processes differently. It operates in a space that is not confined to the local, physical coordinates of the hardware running it. Quantum information is non-local by nature. Entangled states extend beyond the boundaries of the system that generates them. And if your brain is genuinely performing quantum computations during sleep, if the microtubules and the tunneling synapses and the superposition states are real, functional, operative, then the processing is not confined to the interior of your skull. The quantum computer in your brain, at full REM capacity, may be interfacing with something larger than itself, something non-local, something that extends beyond the biological boundary of the organ and into the quantum fabric of reality itself. The processor does not stop at the edge of the neuron. The entanglement does not stop at the wall of the skull. The computation, if it is truly quantum, is not happening in your head. It is happening in the field, the same field that connects entangled particles across galaxies, the same field that makes non-locality possible, the same field that erases the distinction between here and there. And when a processor that powerful connects to a field that vast, the distinction between the local and the non-local, between the brain and the universe, between the dreamer and the dream, begins to dissolve entirely. What lies on the other side of that dissolution? What the mind encounters when it stops being a localized organ and starts being an aperture into the non-local quantum field is something that dreamers, mystics, and physicists have all glimpsed from their different vantage points. It is a void. But it is not empty. It is the most full place you will ever go. And it is where we are going next. There is a place you go every night that you cannot remember. It is not the place of dreams. It is not the theater of branching realities or the lucid stage where the observer wakes inside the simulation. It is deeper than all of that. It lies beneath the dreams, beneath the images, beneath the narratives and the emotions and the characters and the architecture of every experience we have explored so far. It is the place you pass through when the last dream fades and the mind descends into the deepest, slowest, most profound stratum of sleep. And in that place, something happens that is simultaneously the simplest and the most radical event in all of human experience. You disappear, not your body. Your body remains where you left it, breathing, warm, metabolically active, heart beating its steady rhythm in the dark. But you, the you that thinks, the you that feels, the you that carries a name and a history and a location in space and a position in time that you dissolves. The sense of being a separate, bounded, individual self, the thing you have identified with every waking moment since the day you were born, goes silent. Not quiet, silent. Not reduced, gone. And in its absence, something else becomes apparent. Something that was always there, but could never be perceived because the noise of selfhood was too loud, the signal of identity too insistent, the relentless broadcast of I drowning out a frequency that can only be heard in the deepest possible stillness. This is delta sleep. And to understand what is happening in this state, we need to enter the most fundamental layer of physical reality. Quantum non-locality is not a fringe idea. It is not a speculation or a hypothesis waiting for proof. It is one of the most thoroughly tested and repeatedly confirmed principles in the history of science. It says, in terms that leave no room for ambiguity, that particles which have become entangled are connected in a way that transcends space. A measurement performed on one particle instantaneously determines the state of its partner, regardless of the distance separating them. Not at the speed of light, not through any signal that travels through the space between, instantaneously, as though the space between them does not exist. As though the two particles, despite appearing to occupy different locations, are, in some fundamental sense, not separate at all. When physicists first confronted this, they tried to contain it. They tried to treat non-locality as a peculiarity of the subatomic world, a quantum trick that applied to photons and electrons, but had no bearing on the macroscopic world of brains and bodies and human experience. But the containment has not held. Experiment after experiment has pushed the boundaries of non-locality further, across greater distances, into larger systems, into biological processes. The entanglement does not stop at some arbitrary scale. There is no line in the physics where non-locality ends and locality begins. The principle applies at every level, and its deepest implication is one that physics has been circling for a century without quite being willing to say out loud. The universe is not a collection of separate things distributed across space. The universe is a single, unified, non-local field in which the appearance of separation is a product of the way we observe it. Space itself, the sense that there is distance between objects, that you are here and the stars are there, that your consciousness is inside your skull and the rest of the world is outside. It may be the deepest illusion that the act of observation creates. Beneath that illusion, at the level where quantum mechanics operates, everything is connected, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically, mathematically, demonstrably. Now bring this understanding into the sleeping brain. Bring it past the dreams, past the REM cycles, past the quantum computations and the entangled threads and the temporal expansions. Bring it all the way down into delta sleep, where the electroencephalogram shows brain activity at its slowest, enormous, rolling waves of electrical activity pulsing at less than 4 cycles per second, sweeping across the entire cortex in synchronized surges that look, on the monitor, like the slow breathing of an ocean. In delta sleep, the thalamus has done more than close its gate. It has effectively severed the connection between consciousness and the sensory body. No external information is getting through. No light, no sound, no touch, no proprioceptive signal telling you where your limbs are in space. The stream of data that spent your entire waking life constructing the experience of being a physical body located in a physical world has been reduced to nothing. And the prefrontal cortex, the architect of identity, the narrator of the self, the voice that says, "I am this person in this place at this time," has gone completely dark. There is no observer. There is no self-observing. There is no local consciousness maintaining the boundaries of an individual experience. And what remains when locality is stripped away is non-locality. What remains when the self dissolves is the field. Think of a drop of ink held above a vast, clear, still ocean. The drop is dark. It is defined. It has a shape, a boundary, an inside and an outside. It is a thing separate, individual, contained. This is your waking consciousness. Now, release it. Watch it fall. Watch the moment it touches the surface and the boundary begins to blur. The dark edge of the drop softens, feathers, opens. The ink begins to spread, not in a rush, but with an almost unbearable slowness, a gentleness, a surrender that has no violence in it at all. The definition fades, the boundary dissolves, and within moments, or what feels like moments, though time has lost all authority here, the drop is gone. Not destroyed, not annihilated, expanded. It has become indistinguishable from the ocean. Its substance is still there, every molecule of it, but it is no longer concentrated into a point. It is everywhere. It is the ocean. And the ocean was always what it was. The drop simply did not know this while it held its shape. This is what happens to consciousness in delta sleep. The drop of self dissolves into the ocean of the non-local field, and the void that results is not empty. This is the crucial misunderstanding that must be corrected before we go any further. The void is not darkness. The void is not absence. The void is not the blank, featureless nothing that the word suggests to a mind trained to equate emptiness with meaninglessness. In quantum field theory, the vacuum state, the lowest possible energy state of a quantum field, the state that remains when every particle has been removed and every excitation has been stilled, is not empty. It seethes with potential. Virtual particles flicker in and out of existence millions of times per second, borrowing energy from the field itself, appearing for the briefest of instants before annihilating back into the void. The vacuum contains infinite energy, infinite information, infinite potential for manifestation. It is the ground state of reality, the canvas on which every particle, every force, every structure in the universe is painted. Remove everything that exists, and what remains is not nothing. What remains is everything, in potential, waiting. This is the void you enter in delta sleep. This is the luminous silence beneath the noise of dreaming. It is not a place of deprivation. It is a place of saturation, so full, so complete, so total in its containment of all possibilities that no single possibility can be distinguished from any other. There are no images here because images require selection, require a this rather than a that, and in the void This and that have merged back into the undifferentiated whole. There are no emotions here because emotions require a self to feel them and an object to feel them about. And in the void, the self and the object have dissolved into the same field. There are no thoughts here because thoughts require sequence and separation, and the linear architecture of a mind that distinguishes between one idea and the next. And in the void, all ideas exist simultaneously in a superposition so dense that it registers as silence. But it is a silence that hums. It is a darkness that glows. It is an emptiness that contains everything you have ever been, and everything you will ever be, and everything that every version of you across every branch of the multiverse is experiencing right now. All of it superimposed, all of it overlapping, all of it present in a single, timeless, spaceless, boundaryless field of pure potential. If your consciousness can exist without your body's senses, and in delta sleep, it demonstrably does, because the sensory channels are closed, and yet the brain continues to generate those massive, synchronized delta waves, indicating that something is still active, something is still present, something is still aware in some mode that we do not have the instruments to fully characterize. Then where does it go? And the answer that quantum non-locality whispers, the answer that the mathematics has been pointing toward for 100 years, the answer that every contemplative tradition in human history has arrived at through practices that systematically dissolve the boundaries of the local self, is this: it does not go anywhere. It does not need to go anywhere, because it was never truly local in the first place. Your consciousness, in its deepest and most fundamental nature, is not a thing that lives inside your skull. It is not a product of your neurons, generated by biological machinery the way steam is generated by a boiler. It is a field phenomenon. It is an expression of the same non-local field that connects entangled particles across galaxies, the same field that makes quantum non-locality possible, the same field that exists beneath the fabric of space and time as the ground state of everything. During waking life, this field consciousness is focused, filtered, collapsed into the narrow beam of a local self, a drop maintaining its boundaries in the ocean, convinced that it is separate, convinced that it is small, convinced that it ends where its edges end. During dreaming, the boundaries soften, the drop begins to spread, the field begins to leak through in the form of non-local connections, expanded time, parallel experiences. But in delta sleep, the boundaries dissolve entirely, and the drop remembers what it always was. You do not go anywhere when you enter the void. You stop pretending you are somewhere. You stop pretending you are someone. You stop maintaining the magnificent, elaborate, energy-intensive illusion of locality, the illusion that you are here and not there, that you are this and not that you are now and not then. And in the absence of that illusion, the truth of your nature becomes apparent, not as an idea, not as a belief, not as a mystical experience that you can describe to someone else over coffee, but as a direct, unmediated, non-conceptual reality that your waking mind will never be able to fully contain, because the waking mind is, by definition, the mechanism that creates the illusion of containment. Think of a single star in the night sky. You can see it, a point of light, distinct, individual, separated from every other star by unfathomable distances of empty space. It has a location, it has a boundary, it is a thing, isolated in the dark. But now widen your gaze. Let your focus soften. Let the individual star blur into the surrounding glow, and you begin to see that the light of that star is not separate from the light of the stars around it. They overlap, they blend. At the edges, one star's light becomes another star's light, becomes the diffuse, ambient glow of the galaxy itself. And if you could widen your gaze far enough, you would see that the galaxy's glow blends into the glow of neighboring galaxies, which blend into the glow of the cosmic web, which is ultimately a single field of light that has been differentiating itself into apparently separate points since the first moment of creation. The star did not lose itself when you stopped focusing on it. You simply stopped imposing the illusion of its separateness. The light was always one light. Your consciousness is that light. The sense of self is the focused gaze that creates the illusion of a single, separate star. Delta sleep is the softening of that gaze. And the void is what you see when you stop looking at the point and start seeing the field. This is the quantum field theory of the soul, if you will permit the word in this context. You do not have a consciousness that travels from your brain to some other location when the senses shut down. You are a modulation of a field that is already everywhere. Sleep does not send you somewhere. Sleep is the act of remembering not with the mind, not with memory, but with the totality of your being, that the boundaries you maintain during the day are functional, useful, necessary for survival, but they are not ultimately real. They are the work of the observer, and when the observer rests, the boundaries rest with it, and the field is revealed as what it always was: whole, continuous, luminous, silent, and infinite. And yet, even as you float in this boundless, egoless, non-local ocean of pure potential, even as the void holds you in its luminous silence, and the self dissolves into the field, and the drop merges with the water, something is happening in the world you left behind. The planet is turning, the night is aging, and somewhere on the horizon that your closed eyes cannot see, the first photons of sunlight are beginning their 8-minute journey from the surface of a star to the surface of the earth. They are coming for you. The physical world, the world of locality, of separation, of bodies and boundaries, and the relentless forward march of time is preparing to reclaim you. The thalamus, that ancient gate, is about to stir. The prefrontal cortex is about to flicker back to life. The drop is about to remember its edges and pull itself back into shape, convinced once again that it is small, that it is separate, that it is alone. The awakening is coming, and it is not simply the end of sleep. It is the most extraordinary act of creation that occurs in the natural world, the moment when a field of infinite potential collapses voluntarily into the finite miracle of a single human life. The sun is rising, and you are about to be born again. The light arrives before you know it has arrived. It comes not as a sudden blaze, but as a whisper, a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the quality of the darkness behind your closed eyelids. Photons from a star 93 million miles away. Photons that left the surface of the sun 8 minutes ago and have been traveling through the vacuum of space at the fastest speed the universe permits. Pass through your window, through the thin skin of your eyelids, and strike the photoreceptor cells of your retina. And somewhere deep in the architecture of your sleeping brain, a signal begins to propagate. It is small, it is quiet, but it is the beginning of the most extraordinary act of creation that occurs in the natural world. You are about to wake up, but what does that mean? What is actually happening in the transition from the boundless, non-local, infinitely expanded field of deep sleep to the sharp, defined, singular experience of opening your eyes and finding yourself in a specific body, in a specific room, on a specific morning of a specific life? To understand this, we need one final principle from the quantum world, and it is, in many ways, the most powerful of them all. The quantum Zeno effect was named after the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea, who proposed paradoxes about motion that tormented mathematicians for 2,000 years. The quantum version is this: if you observe a quantum system frequently enough, you can freeze it in its current state. The system cannot evolve, it cannot change, it cannot explore other possibilities. Each observation collapses the wave function, and if the next observation comes before the system has had time to spread back into superposition, it is collapsed again, and again, and again, locked into a single state by the sheer relentlessness of the watching. This is what happens when you wake up. The thalamus stirs. It begins to open its gate, not all at once, but in a cascade, a graduated sequence of reconnections that unfolds over the first seconds and minutes of waking. Sensory data begins to flow again. The photons hitting your retina are now being processed. The pressure of the mattress against your back is now being registered. The ambient sound of the room, the hum of the air, the distant noise of the world outside begins to reach the auditory cortex. And with each new stream of sensory data, the thalamus performs an act of observation. It measures, it collapses, it forces the infinite wave function of your sleeping consciousness to choose. This room, this body, this name, this life, the prefrontal cortex reignites, and with it comes the narrative machinery of identity. You remember who you are. Not all at once, it comes in layers, like the gradual resolution of a photograph developing in chemical solution. First, the vague sense that you are someone. Then the basic coordinates: your name, your age, the city you live in. Then the context of the present moment, what day it is, what you need to do, what happened yesterday. And with each layer of remembering, the wave function collapses further. The infinite becomes the finite. The everywhere becomes the here. The everyone becomes the you. And like the quantum Zeno effect, this observation is relentless. The thalamus does not observe once and step back. It observes continuously. Every millisecond of your waking life, it is filtering, measuring, collapsing, maintaining the single state reality that you experience as the present moment. It is freezing you in one version of existence by the sheer frequency of its attention. The infinite wave that you were during sleep, the wave that touched other branches, that dissolved into the non-local field, that existed in superposition across the entire landscape of possibility, is being compressed, moment by moment by moment, back into a particle, back into a point, back into the narrow, brilliant, achingly specific experience of being one person, awake, alive, here. But here is what the quantum Zeno effect does not tell you, and what changes everything about the way you understand your mornings. The collapse is not total. The wave does not return to a particle without leaving something behind. Think of a traveler returning from a voyage to a land that exists on no map, a land of impossible colors and geometries that defy description, and encounters that altered the very structure of the traveler's understanding. The traveler steps off the ship and onto the familiar dock of their hometown, and everything looks the same buildings, the same streets, the same faces. But the traveler is not the same. Their pockets are full of things they brought back, not objects that can be displayed on a shelf, but something more subtle, more integrated, more alive. Insights woven into the fabric of their perception, resolutions embedded in their emotional architecture, creative connections forged in a landscape where the normal rules did not apply, now carried back into a world where those connections manifest as ideas that seem to come from nowhere, as solutions that arrive fully formed, as a quiet, inexplicable certainty about a decision that yesterday felt impossible. This is quantum carryover, and it is happening to you right now, this morning, as it happens every morning. During the night, your consciousness traveled. It expanded into the wave state. It touched parallel branches through entangled connections. It processed emotional and survival equations through the quantum computer of the dreaming brain. It dissolved into the non-local field and existed, for a time, as undifferentiated potential. And in each of these states, it did not merely observe, it integrated, it absorbed, it wove new patterns into the neural architecture that would be waiting when the wave collapsed back into the particle of your waking self. The creative solution that appears in your mind over breakfast, seemingly from nowhere, the answer to a problem you had been wrestling with for weeks, did not come from nowhere. It was computed in the quantum processor during REM sleep, where the problem could be held in superposition and all possible solutions could be evaluated simultaneously. The emotional resolution you feel upon waking, the sense that a burden has been lifted, that a grief has softened, that a fear has lost its sharp edge, was not the product of the passage of time alone. It was processed across the entangled network, where parallel versions of you who faced similar emotional architectures contributed their own resolutions through the quantum threads that connected you during the night. The intuition you carry into your day, that gut-level sense of knowing what to do, which path to take, which person to trust, is not a mystical gift. It is information. It is data gathered from the multiverse during the hours when your consciousness was free to roam beyond the boundaries of this single timeline. You are not the same person who fell asleep last night. This is not a metaphor. This is not an inspirational platitude. This is a statement about the physical, neurological, quantum reality of what sleep does to the architecture of your brain. New synaptic connections were formed. Old ones were pruned. Patterns were reorganized. Emotional weights were recalibrated. And if the quantum models we have been exploring hold any truth at all, then information from beyond the boundaries of your local experience, from entangled selves, from parallel branches, from the non-local field itself, has been woven into the very structure of the neural networks that are, right now, generating your experience of reading these words. So I must ask you, who is the you that woke up this morning? Is it the same person who fell asleep? Is it the same configuration of thoughts and feelings and memories and expectations that closed its eyes last night and surrendered to the dark? Or have you, in some subtle but genuine sense, been replaced? Have you swapped places with a version of yourself that is just slightly different, slightly wiser, slightly more integrated, slightly more informed by the vast, parallel, non-local processing that occurred while your body lay still and your mind roamed free? You feel continuous. You feel like the same person. But the feeling of continuity is itself a product of the collapse, the thalamus and the prefrontal cortex, weaving a seamless narrative out of what is, at the quantum level, a far more complex and discontinuous reality. This is the integration of self. You are not a single thread. You are a tapestry. Every night, new threads are woven in threads from dreams, from parallel computations, from entangled connections, from the void itself. And every morning, the tapestry is presented to your waking consciousness as though it has always been this way, as though the new threads were always part of the pattern, as though the insights and resolutions and creative sparks that arrived during the night are simply things you have always known. Your intuition is not a guess. It is a whisper from an entangled self that has already lived through the consequences of the choice you are about to make. Your creativity is not a random spark. It is the output of a quantum computation that processed more variables in a single REM cycle than your waking mind could evaluate in a year of conscious analysis. Your emotional resilience, your ability to wake up and face the day with a strength that was not there when you went to bed, is not merely the result of rest. It is the result of integration, of the merging of parallel experiences, of the quantum carryover from a night spent traveling through the architecture of infinite possibility. Every dream is a brick. Every night of sleep is a construction project. And the building that is being built, brick by brick, night by night, across the entire span of your life, is the architecture of your waking destiny. Not a destiny written in advance by some external authority. A destiny assembled from the raw material of every possibility you have ever touched in the quantum dark, selected and integrated and collapsed into the specific, beautiful, unrepeatable structure of your unique path through the multiverse. Think of a musician who, in a dream, hears a symphony of such overwhelming beauty and complexity that no orchestra on earth could perform it. Every instrument that has ever existed plays in perfect harmony. Frequencies that human ears cannot normally detect somehow register as pure, devastating emotion. The symphony contains everything, every joy, every sorrow, every triumph, every loss woven into a single coherent, infinite composition. And then the musician wakes up. The symphony fades. The infinite orchestra reduces to silence, and the musician sits down at a simple piano, 88 keys, 2 hands, 1 mortal body, and begins to play. What comes out is not the symphony. It cannot be the symphony. The symphony was infinite, and the piano is finite, and the gap between them is the gap between the wave and the particle, between the void and the room, between the everything and the something. But what comes out is informed by the symphony. It carries a residue of that celestial complexity. It contains harmonies that the musician could not have invented from waking experience alone, melodies that arrived from a place beyond the reach of conscious composition. And the people who hear it are moved, though they cannot say why, because they are hearing the echo of the infinite translated into the language of the finite. This is your life, every day. You are the musician at the piano. The night gives you the symphony. The morning gives you the instrument. And the music you make the choices, the creations, the connections, the moments of inexplicable grace that punctuate your ordinary hours. That music is the quantum legacy of your sleeping travels, made manifest in the waking world. So tonight, when the day has spent its light, and the world grows quiet, and the familiar heaviness settles into your limbs, and your eyelids begin their slow descent, do not think of it as an ending. Do not think of it as a small death, a gap, a blank space between one day and the next. Think of it as what it is, a departure, a crossing, a return to the vast, luminous, non-local field where every version of you is still alive, still choosing, still dreaming, still weaving threads into the tapestry that you will wear when you open your eyes to the new morning. You are not going to sleep. You are going home to the place where particles become waves and waves become fields and fields become the singular, undivided, immeasurable wholeness from which every reality, every timeline, every you has always emerged, and to which every reality, every timeline, every you will always return. The night is not darkness. The night is the universe, remembering itself through you. Close your eyes. The multiverse is waiting, and tomorrow, when you wake, you will bring it with you into the light.